more than a play, the Vagina Monologues opened up a national dialogue about women's reproductive health, sexuality, and sexual abuse. And in the years after it premiered, back in 1996, it turned into a movement to stop violence against women. Now the playwright behind those monologues is telling an even more personal story. In her new memoir, Reckoning, V, formerly known as Eve Ensler, shares her nearly 5 decades of art and activism through a collection of her journals, poems, and other writings. And V joins me now.
VG.
You know, I was thinking Vagina Monologues. Thank you so much. This work, the Vagina Monologues, is so important to so many women and has been for decades now. What was it like writing a memoir about this?
Well, Reckoning is really a collection of writings that I've accumulated and over 45 years. And I think what happened during COVID is, for those of us who were privileged enough not to be on the front lines in the hospitals and serving people, we were kind of locked in with our thoughts and our past and our nostalgia and our memory and our ghosts, and we're kind of like dealing with that as we had the world at our fingertips, which we were reckoning with, whether it was the incredible disaster of climate, fires burning in the West, or the George Floyd killing, which just was a diabolical public 10 minutes, which kind of ignited this national reckoning, or whether it was the reckoning with our infrastructure, where we saw how we didn't care about the health care of people in this country, particularly brown and black people who were dying at faster rates, and our healthcare workers, who we were sending nurses in with garbage bags, right, as uniforms, and reusing masks. And I think there was so much happening in that period that was about reckoning, both personal reckoning inside myself, but reckoning with the external political situation, and they seemed somehow very much in sync with each other. So I decided to kind of put my writings together under that kind of title or that umbrella to see if they could be my offering to the kind of national reckoning that I hope will continue despite the pushbacks we're seeing now from the fringe right wing, which doesn't really want this country to move forward, and sees that we're finally having this reckoning and is now going to end African studies, American studies in Florida, and ban books and kill off critical race theory, and basically try to stop this momentum of reckoning, which is so critical to the future of this country.
Does that tend to be your process when you are feeling, when you are experiencing, you write?
It's how I've survived, without a doubt. I think when you grow up in a very violent home, you have to find methods of survival, and some people shut down, some people become violent. I learned early on that if I could write, I could try to make meaning or make something out of the madness that I was feeling inside. And I think, some people write because they want to write. I write because I have to write. It's been a process of survival.
Do you find, when you wrote the Vagina Monologues and, perhaps its first run, did you think it would touch as many people as it has sitting here today?
Oh, God, no. I just, I always joke, the first time I performed it, I just prayed I wouldn't be shot. It was more just getting through it and not, and surviving. I had no idea. I mean, look, I had been a playwright for quite a while before that, and I was writing plays about homeless people and nuclear war, so you can imagine I wasn't a terribly popular playwright. So to write a play about vaginas, I assumed it would kind of secure my downtown status as a playwright. And that play was just amazing what happened. From the minute I started to perform it, women would line up after the show to tell me their stories. And I thought, oh, this is going to be wonderful. I'm going to hear great stories about sexual satisfaction and people's really desires. And in fact, 90% of the women were lining up to tell me how they'd been battered or raped or incested or cut. And it was so overwhelming. It was so devastating that I was either going to stop the show or I was going to find a way to use the play to end violence against women, trans, and non-binary people. And that's when we started V-Day 25 years ago.
Do you think that the person you were who wrote the Vagina Monologue and had it premiere back in the 1990s, could the same person you are today write that piece?
That's a good question. I think it's really good when we're younger that we don't know what we're doing on some level, because you kind of have a brashness and a boldness that propels you to take risks. I still take a lot of risks, but I have much more consciousness, and the world has changed a lot.
Yeah.
The world is much more canceling, judgmental. You know, you're always circumventing landmines. Do you know? Where before there was a kind of welcoming of new ideas and welcoming of dialogue and welcoming of, let's be in this discourse. We may disagree, but now things are very polarized and positional. It's harder, but I would certainly write the same play again. I mean, you know, I sadly, I always hope the play will become outdated, right? And in fact, since COVID, you know, I write about it in the book. I talk about disaster patriarchy, which is loosely based on Naomi Klein's concept of disaster capitalism, where a disaster occurs and people move in to exploit that disaster to move their own agenda forward. I think COVID has been disaster patriarchy because the pushback against women's rights all around the world, whether it's the fact that so many women were locked up with partners who were violent, and they had no recourse or place to go, whether it was the fact that children all around the world have stopped going to schools, right? And so now they're going to be pushed back, and their rights are going to be disabled, workers' rights. Right. And it's been a very rough time for women.
Well, Reckoning is the memoir, and I know many folks are excited to read it. V, I want to thank you for your time.
No, thank you.
The book again is Reckoning.